Good morning to everybody. This is the session in which we take a good hard look at ourselves, indies and commissioners. The problem is, as we'll see, it isn't that pretty. We are looking at each other through very different spectacles. To the uninitiated, our industry seems like one long self-indulgent whinge. But this stuff is absolutely critical. The creative industries are a key part of the government strategy, apparently worth £92 billion to the UK economy. Sometimes you still feel like you're in an episode of The Young Ones. Before we reveal the results of this year's survey and put it to our industry leaders, we thought you'd like to be reminded of what happened during this session in 2014.
Cancelled meetings, indies starting production without green lights, ignored emails, rude behaviour.
That's got worse, that's really depressing. I do think it's repeat offenders.
I'm not making excuses, but I think size does matter.
Christ, if I sent an email to somebody and they hadn't replied a week later, I'd feel pissed off.
My general view on the whole survey was I thought we were better than this survey suggested. So a kind of top line thing is we're going to get miles better.
Pre-production levels of unfunded development.
I think money spent in development is a much better use of the money than money spent in post-production trying to rescue something. So I mean, I think in terms
But
of
why
where
not spend
the
Channel 4's money on the development if you believe in the project?
Too many versions of treatments before they reach channel controller, and then sometimes channel controllers want more versions.
I've always been told a no is better than a maybe, and a maybe hangs on for months and months.
2 versions of a treatment before it goes to channel controller, no more.
You get trained in production, you don't really get trained in commissioning. And you're in charge of quite a big budget and a lot of power, and no one kind of says, this is how to do it well, and this is how one does it badly.
What we committed to last year, we are delivering on consistently. There is one set of notes, one clear voice from the channel, and we're articulating our vision for that show consistently.
For a small independent, starting a production without a green light is possibly the scariest thing you can ask them to do.
There are some individuals who are letting us down, and if they are continuing to do that and being rude and unhelpful in that way, I don't want them on the team.
You're absolutely right. It's very hard for a supplier to complain about the people they're supplying to.
You know, when you're an indie, if you're dealing with a commissioner who's not particularly good, it's really hard to raise that with a channel head.
Having a good experience in a meeting does depend on you getting the meeting in the first place.
I want feedback on my commissioners so that I can get the best ideas in and work with the best companies who enjoy working with the channel. Why would I be upset if they were to point out that actually so-and-so's not very good at communication?
I suspect what's good as coming out of this is that we get the issue into the open. I reckon we're all now going to find ways of monitoring this.
You hope that stuff like this everyone listens to and you all collectively respond.
4 years on, massive full house for this. You'll be wanting some very big answers. You might have spotted Peter Fincham there saying he'd be absolutely gutted if he didn't get a response in a week. Well, I wonder how long it takes him to get the response now that he's a supplier. Let me introduce the panel. Now, you'll have spotted there that the only survivor from 2014 looking very svelte and dapper, is Ben Frau. He'll tell us how he did it. He's got the same role in Channel 5 as he had then. Charlotte Moore was controller of BBC One back then. She is now director of content. Kevin Ligo is director of ITV. Ian Katz is director of programmes at Channel 4, recently entered a whole new universe and attempted a fabulous piece of journalistic deflection in broadcast this morning with his creative contracts. Zai Bennett, director of programmes, Sky Entertainment UK and Ireland. At the end of the session, we're going to have a look back over this hour and see some key moments and repeat them to you. Not necessarily promises, but things our panelists have said that have stuck with us and maybe put towards the survey, which is going to take place next year. We would like you to turn on your app. It may not work because this is television technology. And we may ask you to vote in the app if it works. Otherwise, we have 2 roving mics, and we might do it the old-fashioned way. Anyway, let's look first of all at who actually responded to this survey. And actually, there were very senior people in the independent sector responding to this, the people that make these big calls to the controllers, people that actually have to pitch. Look at that. We had 30% managing director, 14% chief executives, creative directors, 29%. So we had people who had been indies in operation for more than 16 years, 80% of the respondents, so that is pretty good. But for the very first time, we asked suppliers, not only suppliers, but commissioners, to respond to the survey, and they didn't hold back. Let's look at some of the things the commissioners had to say. Okay. Just not listening when we say no in the room. Continuing to plough ahead as it's just wasting time for everybody. Some indies can email 5 or 6 scripts and ask for an answer on them the next week. They also like to ask for notes on things you didn't like. Pitching the same idea to multiple members of the same team. I don't massively mind, but indies don't realise we sit opposite each other. So let's just say that this is going to be quite a gutsy session. So let's look at our first big piece of news. Time to get a meeting. Time to get a meeting. Thinking in the last 12 months, the average time it's taken you to get a meeting. Now, 1 month, we'd say, well, you know, there we have it. 1 week, Channel 4, Channel 5, Sky. Look at Channel 5. The golden boy in the room. The golden boy in the room.
We've only just begun.
Pardon? You've only just begun. Exactly. The key thing is getting this meeting to commission the Acknowledge Your Treatment proposal in an online script. How long does that take? And we have it there for BBC 1 month plus, 3 or 4 weeks. The best time for Channel 5, Sky, 21%. So you can see that there's quite a big disparity there. What do you think about that, Charlotte? That it takes more than a month to get a first meeting after script?
Well, I think, you know, we work with an enormous number of suppliers. You know, I think it's 300 independents, suppliers a year. 60 of those last year were new. And then, of course, there will be people beyond that we like to see. And obviously with the nations and regions work we're doing and the, you know, committed to working.
Do you have enough commissioners, do you think?
Well, I think we've obviously got a fairly new team that's been put together. So we're working very hard. I think from a proposal to getting a meeting, it depends whether 1 month plus. I think a month is probably quite realistic, if I'm absolutely honest. I think that depends, you know, how much longer to actually talk about the idea. I think one has to remember also that I think this is the sort of explaining some of this. I mean, I would expect everyone to get an acknowledgement of the idea. A meeting, which I think is what this is saying, a meeting is something which I think that is about the priority for that idea. Is it something that needs to come out very, you know, that we need to discuss because it's going to be in the schedule quite quickly, or is it an idea that you're thinking, that might be interesting, I'd like to explore it? Well, so, look, I think communication and getting back to people is incredibly important. We talk a lot in the commissioning team about response rates, but I think, to be honest, with the workload and number of people we see, I think a month is, you know, the right side of a month is a good place to be.
Ian, last time, 4 years ago, it was 11%. Now it is up to 37%, taking a month. I mean, you'll not be happy with that with your new creative contract.
Well, the thing that you referred to as a piece of journalistic deflection. Well, look, I look at that and I see the vast majority, 60-odd%, under a month. And like Charlotte, we deal with a huge number of indies knocking on for 300. So I don't think that's terrible.
But why do you think it's getting worse? I mean, why has it got worse, do you think?
I don't think I can tell you that, but I have spent a large chunk of the last 6 months talking to indies, talking to commissioners about how the relationship is working and where the frustrations are. And actually, although I've heard lots of frustrations around speed of response, clarity, and so on, by the way, on both sides of the fence, time to a first meeting has not been one that has figured large. So I've made a load of commitments in our new creative contract, and time to first meeting isn't one of them because it's not one of the things that we heard as a sort of top frustration.
Kevin, ITV, last time around it was 11%, now it's 22%. So
shocking.
It is shocking. It is shocking. You've doubled. And you look suitably shocked.
Yes. Yes, humbled. I'm humbled.
Does it?
You know that Fincham was good, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Peter Fincham.
Yeah. Heady days.
Yeah, heady days. Now an Uber supplier. Not an Uber supplier. Money me could do.
He's not driving Uber, is it?
But the thing is, Kevin, does it matter to you?
Yes, I think it's a slight blunt measurement because, as Charlotte pointed out, 1 month plus, it could be 8 months for some, or it could be a month and a day. But I I think also it's what sort of response? Is that from somebody saying, oh, I've got an idea for a drama, or is it somebody with a fully formed idea that they sent in they haven't heard back from?
But I mean, to be fair, the 80% of the respondees to this whole survey are in fact, well, not drama. You know?
Okay. Look, yeah, you can always be better. I think, what are we? I can't even read it from here. It's...
You're 22%.
Yeah, 22%.
Of more than a month. And Charlotte's gone from, I think it was, 16% to 57%. 16%. And Danny practically, you know... 16%. 16% of people were waiting more than a month to get a first meeting in the 2014 survey. And Danny was incredibly apologetic.
Yeah, look what happened.
But this is about... But this is about someone getting an idea to a meeting.
Yeah, no, the first expression of interest to a meeting.
And I think, obviously it's really good that we get in contact with people and we have meetings, but this instrument, I can see the 1 month to, I don't know how many, I think to have a meeting within a month to discuss an idea, you're thinking of commissioning for a year and a half's time. It's the quality of the meeting, the quality of the conversation, that's really important.
Well, let's just look at a next slide, which is what the Commissioner's response to the same question was. Look at that. There's something a bit out of kilter there. Ben, how would you like to... Are you going to put people out of their misery by telling us your story?
Well, I think that one of the ways of solving a problem is to give a very clear answer when the first idea comes in. Yes or no. If it's a yes, you want to follow it up pretty quickly so it doesn't go anywhere else. If it's a no, that tells them, I don't want the idea and I'm not going to, don't bother coming in for a meeting. Because what you don't want to do is have lots of meetings about ideas that you fundamentally are not interested in.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I am obsessed about, and the poor team will tell you that I am obsessed by, is getting back to the independents really quickly going, no, 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 you should be able to tell within reading 2 or 3 lines whether it is or isn't something that we are even vaguely interested in.
And of course you have whatever it is 8 commissioners.
Yeah.
And if a supplier ever was to come to Channel 5 and say they hadn't got a response...
They do. I had one the other week and I fired off a big email as a result.
I thought you said you fired the commissioner.
No, somebody emailed me and said, I've sent 5 ideas in and I still don't know what you're looking for because your commissioners haven't got back to me. So I said to the commissioners, you need to get back to these people, and if you don't, then give me the ideas and I will get back to the independent companies.
That's very lenient of you.
Well, no, but I just think it's a fundamental principle for me. I mean, rightly or wrongly, I really do care that we treat independent companies with respect and we let them know where they stand. We have less money than anybody else. We're commissioning thousands of hours. We need the independents to want to come and work for us and to keep them hanging on.
But Si, tell me how you think it can be that, you know, on those responses, particularly to BBC and Channel 4, it's 37%, 57%, but the commissioners think that only 2% of meetings take longer than a month to set up. There's a mismatch somewhere.
But there's clearly a disparity between what they think is happening and what's actually happening. But I mean, from my point of view, looking at that, under a month is not terrible for me. I think that's actually not bad. Most of the spend we invest in is scripted, and that takes a bit longer. But my point would be similar to Ben's, which is, I don't want meetings about meetings. I think the more important thing is what's that meeting going to actually achieve?
Yeah.
Are you going to actually get on and do some work in that meeting and get somewhere to commission something? That's the most important thing.
Well, let's move on to another bugbear, and that's beyond getting a meeting or how long it takes, rescheduled meetings. Of course, there's no point in getting a meeting if it's rescheduled or cancelled, and this has been a long-standing bugbear of the industry, and now particularly, of course, with concerns particularly on out of London. Ian, you're going to be spreading more commissioning around the UK. More people are going to have to be travelling around the country. I'll be looking to hear your thoughts on this. So let's now look at rescheduled meetings as far as the commissioners are concerned. In the last 12 months, have you rescheduled a meeting with an indie at what might be deemed unreasonably short notice or at a travel cost? Now, look at that. 79.4% of commissioning responses said no, they hadn't done that. And yes, only 17%. Now let's look at what the indies say. Okay, 69.6% of suppliers feel that they have had meetings rescheduled at inopportune times, at great expense to themselves, and at extremely short notice. Now, you haven't really seen this properly. Let's put those out there together. Yet they are together, and it's a massive stark difference. Kevin Ligo, have you rescheduled meetings at short notice?
I'd hope not, probably have done. I think I like the idea that the sort of bewildered in the blue are similar. So, I don't know. But again, it's a fabulous disparity. No, it is a bad thing.
It is a really bad thing.
It is a bad thing, and it's awful if people are left waiting in lobbies and things like that, and then told no, they can't do it. And I would be livid if I'd heard that was going on at ITV. It has not come to me that. I think it's inexcusable. There are always going to be...
Let's just put it this way: the cost to a small indie, particularly, of making that journey and then having a meeting cancelled at the last minute should be borne surely by the commissioners.
Yes, definitely. When we did the producers forum thing and all the producers come down and listen to ITV, we did pay for people to come down. If they had to come a long way to listen to us all bore on about what we're looking for and what we don't know what we're doing, we offered to pay for coming from Scotland or whatever. It seemed only fair. So I'm totally aligned with that.
Let's look at Channel 4's new model, because of course you're going to be doing a lot of out of London. And will there be, in your new creative contract, an absolute cast iron promise that if you agree to see somebody somewhere at a particular time, that will be held to?
So we've said in the creative contract that we won't cancel meetings inside 24 hours, except...
24 hours? You buy a ticket for an airline, within 24 hours it costs you a freaking fortune. What you want as a small indie is to be able to plan in advance.
Well, there's a kind of question around what is an unreasonably late cancellation. I think anything inside 24 hours is completely unacceptable. Anything inside 48 hours is difficult. The key point here is that by moving to the nations and regions, you said we're going to be asking people to travel more to see us. The whole point is the exact opposite. The people who are going to be travelling more are me and my commissioning colleagues in London. But the whole point of being in the nations and regions is that we're nearer to indies around the country who, instead of having to schlep down to London, can go and see the commissioners who are nearest to them.
So how often will you be holding commissioning meetings around the country with your team?
We're going to figure all that out when we know where our hubs are, when we know where our national headquarters are. But the point is, we are not saying there are going to be whole genres based in location X, which everyone else around the country has to move to. There are going to be a mixture of commissioners around the country who will be able to meet with the people who work near to them.
Zai, from Sky's point of view, on the question of rescheduled meetings, what's the Sky's policy on this?
That's unacceptable if that's what's happening. I would not accept that. And if someone was rescheduled it within that amount of time and there was a cost incurred, we'd cover it. Of course we would. I think that's...
So, just in terms of...
I'd want to hear about it and tell me.
Just let me put this to Ian. So Ian, basically, 24 hours is completely unacceptable. I would say 48 hours, because you can always find another commissioner to stand in. So I think 48 hours is unacceptable. Do you think... are you prepared to make it... Hang on, Zai, are you prepared to make a commitment? I'd be interested if the panel are prepared to make a commitment today, because we have a huge amount of new indies as well, small indies, for whom that budgetary constraint is massive. Are you all prepared to say that it's completely unacceptable to cancel a meeting within 48 hours, as Ian's saying? It's unacceptable to cancel a meeting within 48 hours?
Yes, but you could get somebody else to take the meeting.
Yes, exactly.
As long as it's an appropriate person.
Yeah. Okay,
and they feel they're getting their money.
Charlotte, unacceptable.
I think it's incredibly important. I also think I would really beg the indies, if you are being asked about changing a meeting, to be incredibly vocal about the fact, well, I've booked my ticket, that's actually going to be incredibly difficult. Because sometimes you say, look, we might need to juggle something, could you do it? Please, please let us know. Because I think actually there's a problem with people not feeling they can say that.
Exactly.
And I think it's incredibly important, because we need to know that that is actually a great inconvenience and there is expense, and absolutely we should be paying.
I think that's interesting. I think you're absolutely right, and that too, that it is the key thing is that suppliers are very worried about saying to controllers.
Please don't be
worried.
Do not be worried. I think all of our commissioning team.
Well, you do it through the assistant, don't you? The person who's looking after the diary.
You must tell the assistant.
I'm coming from Scotland.
Yeah.
I'm coming down especially for this. Can you please make sure I'm a priority? Whereas if it's someone coming from Chalk Farm, when I'm based in Camden, it's not quite such a big deal.
The one I like is the one that's flying from LA to see Kevin in London.
Yeah. Did I stop? So did I not see that? But in America.
I'm just going to check with the team. If the app is working, we're going to ask suppliers only this question. Which of the 5 broadcasters do you think has rescheduled more meetings for you? There are 5 buttons in the app, 1 for each broadcaster. Please, everybody that can, get onto your app. Which of the 5 broadcasters do you think has rescheduled more meetings for you? As the suppliers respond to that, I'm going to give you some examples. Some examples of indies getting those meetings, things that were said. I'm just going to say, meetings cancelled at 6 o'clock the evening before when en route to London. Meetings being rescheduled on the day before because the commissioner is out of the country doesn't feel very reasonable. There are so many commissioners who simply don't respond when you've emailed them, often with the treatment they've asked for. It still amazes me. Over 6 months, we have pitched 7 projects to different commissioners of the BBC and not heard back on any of them, apart from one project which we were invited in to discuss with the Assistant Commissioner. The meeting ended with the Assistant Commissioner saying they needed to have a conversation with someone more senior, and we have not heard from them since. Despite positive noises about meetings, doing one-to-one 10-minute sessions at BBC briefings, trying to get a follow-up meeting was promised, but it's been proved totally unachievable. Being outside London makes things difficult as nobody is willing to travel. Well, we know, of course, that that is not the case, certainly for Channel 4 and obviously for BBC, and also I think all the broadcasters at some point or another do meetings. So let's see, do we have now a response from Indies? Which of the 5 broadcasters do you think has rescheduled more meetings for you? Let's see. Let's see, it's coming live.
BBC 64%.
It's coming live.
Channel 4, 28%.
Well, let's just hold, because we're still getting more votes in. Well, I think actually, rather than even waiting for more votes, it's pretty stark.
Better at that.
Charlotte, 64% of respondees from suppliers in this room.
Well, that's not good enough for my team. I should be going back to discuss how we make sure that that does not happen. And I would urge Indies to let us know, because it's not good enough.
And tell me, I want a show of hands in here from suppliers. Who feels from the suppliers' hands up? First of all, suppliers' hands up. Okay, all those hands up. Those of you who feel comfortable about going to the commissioners and saying, you've cancelled meetings and we want a refund. Thank God for you. We have a massive, and you, but people definitely feel uncomfortable about speaking to commissioners and controllers,
Come to me. If that happens, come to me. I want to hear. I'll take that. That's perfectly fine. Not
okay. Same at ITV. If that happens, go to Zai.
No, genuinely, I'm with Zai on that. If you feel that has happened, and if you feel, please tell me about it.
Just come to us instead.
Yeah. In fact, if that happens, then you'll take the ideas as well. If you don't get a meeting, come to Sky with the idea.
I'm not really going to take the idea, but thanks.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's a pretty start to work on. And look, I mean, and I don't know if you actually can see this, Ben, but you get 100% on this.
I'm a little hurt I haven't got any votes. I know it's not the kind of votes you want, but well, it's something that, as I say, it's the smallest PSB and the smallest budgets, etc. For me, it is a priority. Our relationship with the independents is really important, and if we can't pay more money for programmes, the least we can do is to try and make it easier to work with us and get a response.
Right. Now let's talk about this, because you've heard very clearly from Ben Frau that a speedy no is obviously not as good as a speedy yes, but it's a damn sight better than a maybe for 6 months. So on Indies, thinking about the last 12 months, what's the average amount of time you've experienced from first expression to a final no? And let's look at the response on this. First expression to a final no. And BBC, again, you've got 21% has taken 12 months to a final no, 6 to 12 months, 29%. ITV, you're doing very well on this, you're 1 to 3. Channel 4, 1 to 3. Channel 5, very good. And Sky, not bad. Again, I mean, and obviously, Charlotte, I take on board the idea that, in a way, you're the biggest customer. But as the biggest customer and essentially the state broadcaster, you have got the biggest duty, in a way, to get back.
To be very clear with people. And I think being clear with people about the process and how long. I mean, some ideas, without a doubt, are heading towards a decision where it's all about communication to say we're looking at about 6 ideas in this area for this kind of slot. It will take you that time. So I think it's incredibly important that commissioners let suppliers know how this idea, what the progress is going to be and what the process is going to be. I think it's incredibly important that we tell people very quick no's when we know it's a no, and not leave people hanging around. I mean, I've been an indie, I've been a director on the other side, and it's incredibly frustrating, that blank wall. So I absolutely agree, we need to get back
Kevin, you do well on this, as does Channel 4. Do you empower your commissioners, do you say to your commissioners, I want this done very quickly, done and dusted, I want these responses out and I want firm no's rather than maybes. Do you actually say that to your commissioners?
Yes, and they, yes, and they know that, and actually that bears out, thank God, a bit about that. Well, but you have to be careful, because a quick no, you think, oh yes, quick no is the best, and you think, then you get, they didn't even discuss it. They just looked at the bill and they said no. And then so then you wait and you have a meeting, you bring them in and you discuss it and you say no, and they go, well, and they completely changed it. They completely misunderstood what the idea was. So it's very hard. It is the natural order of things, I'm afraid. We can get better, but be careful what you wish for. If you want instant responses, it's going to be no. So, give a little bit of leeway.
That is true.
Honestly.
But Kevin, seriously, what's a reasonable time? Because if a young indie gives you an idea and comes to you and you're saying, if you want a quick response, a responsible no, it's making these relationships work. And of course, everybody in this room knows particular people from indies, but there are lots of new indies, and we need to have a clear set of rules for new indies, particularly when you're talking about a massive injection to the economy from the creative industries. It's got to be professional.
Yes, I would say if someone sends in an idea, it should be acknowledged sort of instantly. Yeah. There should be a commissioning editor at some level saying, oh yes, I've seen your idea, thank you very much, no, or maybe this, or why don't we get together, or a written, yeah, I like this bit, not that bit, can you do something about it? Seems to me 2 weeks, I would hope that could be done, and then a meeting to follow.
Just briefly, Ben, you talk about the message you give to commissioners, and you've got 8 commissioners. So when your response time's obviously very fast, and I know a speedy no is better. If it's not a no, how quickly do you get things moving with your commissioners?
It's usually a yes. I mean, there might be, 10% might be, let's work it up a little bit and see where it goes. But if it's not a no, it's usually a yes. But I would have a weekly routine with the commissioners where they can bring in all the emails that they've got, all the ideas that they have, and they go, bish, 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 bish. We go, no, might be something in that, let's talk about it further. No, let's talk about it. So that they have really, in my opinion, no excuse not to cull an awful lot of stuff. Now, some genres are more complicated. Some genres do require a lot of thought, and you have to look at all the, the shape of the schedule and the texture of the schedule and all that kind of thing. But essentially, if the commissioners know what the leader, in Channel 5's case, me, what I'm looking for, they should have a clear idea about what they should or shouldn't bring to the table.
Which brings us neatly on to the survey part, particularly where the commissioners responded. Top 3 reasons commissioners give for unreasonable delays. Look at this. Lack of time with the channel controller or boss, 50%. Budget issues, 31%. Similar ideas being discussed, 30%. Lack of time with controller or boss. Charlotte.
Well, I think we all try. I mean, I see all my genre commissioning teams, some of the genres every week, some of the genres every 2 weeks, and it is incumbent on them to bring the right number of ideas for proper discussion in the room. So again, I think that's leading to some quick no's. There needs to be very clear, what are you looking for, so that you can give very, very clear feedback.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's something that you presumably are going to be mindful, Ian, as you build your team, that the idea that actually you cannot get that meeting, you cannot get the decision from you, not because you're not really started with a lot of that yet, but the important thing is they can't get enough face time with you to help make those decisions, or the fact that you're going to be doing it differently by empowering commissioners to make the decisions.
Well, I mean, that's my priority. My priority is about empowering my team so that basically when they've made a call on something, in general, I'm going to back that. And that should make that top issue less of an issue. But I've been squinting at the last slide, and I just about managed to read it by the time you moved on. So can I just go back to that last point? Because it strikes me that the missing element in that analysis is any recognition of the different genres at play here. So it's obvious that, for instance, the length of time a scripted proposition is going to take.
As opposed to a dispatch.
And although I've got massive admiration for Ben's bam, bam, bam approach to things, you don't do that much scripted, and it's apples and oranges.
But 80% of this was responsive, as I was saying, to factual supplier. I mean, that was 80%.
Right.
We don't commission factual. We don't commission factual at Sky, really.
Zai, let off
I'd really, if I had control of your app, one question I might ask, because lots of producers have said to me, First they say the second best answer is a quick no, and then you say, really? Is it really? If the choice was between a quick no and this is probably a no, but there's a 20% chance that if we really give it some thought and work, we might get it over the line, which would you rather have? I'd like to know what the honest answer is between that choice.
Well, and what would you say to that? Because what Ian's saying is that people would plead for more time in order to have that dialogue with the commissioner and the supplier as to how even to make the idea better.
I think it would depend on the supplier, the size of the supplier, the realistic chance of them getting a foot in the door and getting a dialogue. For a lot of people, I think at least it gives them the chance to take the idea elsewhere. Just a quick no, at least they know where they stand. They can always come back with something else. I mean, there are nuances here, and I think this is all very sort of black and white, and I think Ian's point about the genres is a good one. It's about the relationship that you have with that independent company. There are people who you have a closer relationship with, you do an awful lot more work with.
You're not doing anything like the volume, of course, that Charlotte's doing.
And the complexity of genres and the complexity of channels and targets and overall strategy for us adds another complexity to the decision making about what you say yes or no
but do you think that your decision making is too centralised? Do you think that your controllers have enough power, your senior commissioners have enough power?
Absolutely. I think anyone who knows working with me, I'm incredibly empowering to my team. However, ideas have to fit into a channel strategy. They have to fit into the quotas and the targets and what are we saying overall. I believe all of my team have an incredibly collaborative approach to that. If a genre head is passionate about making a piece, they are the experts in their subject, absolutely, let's go for it. But of course it fits into a different piece.
And the blurring of the genres makes it more complicated as well, because even in my very small team I have 2 or 3 people who might be developing dog training ideas, and you're going, well, hang on a minute, you're all sitting together, how come 3 of you are all doing the same thing? So there are nuances that we need to
I think all of us would say you don't want to talk about these nuances are not trying to be defensive and excuses. No. I think the most important thing is that there is a really open dialogue to explain the process and why something is a maybe, and look, I think this is a really interesting idea, but it won't work as it is. But shall we grow it? Shall we have more conversations? Is there a way to take it in a way that might work for BBC
clear? You're talking about the strategy is very important to make the clarity of strategy. Kevin, do you think your strategy for ITV and what you're looking for and everything is clear enough? What your commissioners are empowered to look for is clear enough?
Yes, but the golden thing here is it's usually the thing you hadn't thought of, therefore you haven't prescribed, that is the most interesting. But I would be despondent if I didn't think the commissioners, certainly, and actually most indies, don't know what ITV wants. It wants great big noisy, maybe live big noisy events that are going to get 5 million viewers. So I think in some ways it's easier for us than it is the BBC's got all these channels, all these difficult things. But it's fine.
Well, you're trying to do things that haven't been done before, clearly. You want to be surprised, you want an idea you haven't seen. It isn't it's not a direct.
You want to be very careful that we're not so prescriptive that you don't get the thing from left of field, the thing that changes your fortunes or that evolves you onto the next wave. So it is, I mean, I suppose for me, at the end of the day, it's about truth. It's about saying, I really don't like this idea, or there may be something in this idea. It's probably a 10-20%. If you want to pursue it, I'm very happy to have a conversation. But if you want a quick answer and you're going to hold a gun to my head, then it's a no.
Well, let's just do a couple of comments from people that responded, both indies and commissioners. From indies, having been a commissioner and now a producer, I can observe how junior some commissioning editors are. They're left drowning, yet are expected to offer notes to much more experienced producers. Peter Fincham. The process has become increasingly the domain of a single person, the head of broadcast. There's very little delegation. Ian Katz's attempts to empower his commissioners is to be welcomed. From the commissioner's side, during pitching, I find the large majority of indies have done what feels like very little preparation on the current department channel needs, interestingly. And another one there, they usually ask for the head of genre to come to the meeting and talk to them and completely ignore you. Older white men are the worst offenders of this. Okay, now let's look at production and what happens once a show gets going, if it ever does get going. Right, let's look at what was response here now from commissioners first. Commissioners. Top 3 gripes with indies. Over-promising editorially. Not keeping commissioners informed about problems, and they're not putting an agreed budget on screen. And indies' top 3 gripes: changing the editorial brief mid-production is the worst, not acknowledging responsibility for overspends, constant interference at every stage. Okay, let's look at that commissioner's line. Again, Zai, over-promising editorially. Have you found that to be a real problem with indies?
Look, it can be, but I think there's a clear disparity between what the two groups are thinking that they actually are doing, and that's not good. I do not recognise a lot of that from Sky's point of view, but I recognise them as certainly as issues that, over-promising editorially, it would be an issue, absolutely is an issue, but it's the Commissioner's job to hold people to account to that and to make sure that is done in a smooth and proper way.
I think that the interesting one, again, Kevin, from the Commissioner's point of view, is not keeping Commissioners informed about problems. The idea that an indie doesn't actually want to come to the Commissioner with a problem because that looks bad. And that clearly is a problem for Commissioners. They feel that Commissioners are not being informed. Would you accept that? That's what your Commissioners feel sometimes.
Well, it must be so. Look, but the truth about the practicalities of production is once you get in it, things change, people get ideas. What I'd hope is that some of these changes make the show better. I remember Michael Jackson always saying that, and I was trying to rescue some turgid comedy at Channel 4, and Michael would say, "Stop polishing turds, you're wasting your time." And what he meant was there are some things that you start with all hope, they're no good, leave them alone, let them get on with it and deliver. There are other things that you fall in love with it, you want to get involved in it, and you make better as commissioning editor. And I'm absolutely certain that a lot of the involvement, particularly in entertainment, well, in everything, it's because the commissioner, most of whom are all being producers at some stage, just want to help and make it better. This has implications. If it's significant, it can interrupt the budget schedule and therefore increase budgets and all the rest of it. But it is the rough and tumble, is it not, of making production with an involved commissioning team?
It is the rough and tumble, but I'm going to concentrate particularly on the financial implications of that rough and tumble and who accepts the financial implications, because, the idea, look at that, gripes with commissioners, changing editorial brief mid-production. Charlotte, do you recognise that?
I don't think that's acceptable. I think when you set out with an ed spec, you're very clear about what you're doing. I absolutely take, and if this is primarily a factual survey, then I think, we all know that when you get into the real world, life that you might be making a film about spins off in another way. So I think, again, there is an element of it. You don't, what you say on paper is very rarely the finished programme. So it is in a contract and agreement with real intent. It is absolutely for the Commissioner and for the indie to continue that dialogue. I would hope, when it's a good relationship, that's not interference, that's continued dialogue about how things are going on the ground, what's changing, are we going to run over, what compromises might we have to make if we're going to keep it in budget. That dialogue is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical to a successful series.
What do you do about let's talk about the overspend, not acknowledging responsibility for the overspends. That's massive. If you are a small indie and you have an overspend in a production of 15,000, 20,000, in your first year that could wipe out your actual profit. I mean, do you always...
So the question has to be why?
Yes.
Why is there an overspend? Yeah. I mean, I think all these things here are potential positives. If you've got a good relationship with your independent company, I hope they will overpromise editorially. I hope they're as ambitious as I am for every programme. I think that they should keep commissioners informed of any changes, but then we work together on how do we change this programme? What would it cost? Do we make it something else? Is it a 4-parter to a 3-parter? We had a documentary series happen where there was all kinds of disasters happening. We had to completely shift focus working with the the production company.
And that costs the production company more. So therefore, what conversation
You're doing it together. Of course I would pay my share. Of course if I change the title or I decide it needs a new pre-title sequence, I will pick up the tab. But I'm not responsible for wasting money or spending money in the wrong way. So you need clear parameters.
Okay,
and then if your relationship is good, you work together to make the very best programme possible.
Front page of broadcast, interview with Ian. These include ensuring executive producers have real input before commissioning editors asked to review material and asking producers to foot the bill for overspending, except in exceptional circumstances or when Channel 4 changes the key editorial specification. I mean, that is meant to be what happens right now. My point about that is, Ian, who is going to be the decider? Who's going to be the ombudsman at Channel 4 who says Channel 4 is just going to pony up 60k for a change, or the producer's going to be asked to pay 50% of that? If this is your creative contract, how are people going to be treated fairly?
Well, just to be clear, the first thing, we talked a bit earlier about clarity of what we wanted editorially. for me, what's emerged clearly out of the conversations I've been having the last 6 months is the reason I wrote this creative contract with Angela is because I thought we had to clearly spell out how we want to work together, and that's clearly saying these are the circumstances in which we will pay for overruns, and these are the circumstances in which. Yeah. So at least there is a kind of.
Will this be written down in black and white?
It's written down in black and white, and the other thing I think we should acknowledge is there is a tension between this slide and what we were looking at before, because part of being able to actually have a grown-up discussion about whether something is under-delivering or over-delivering is having a really carefully agreed ed spec that we've all signed up to, and having had a kick-off meeting that we've all signed up to. So as I was looking at the issue of how quickly we get to contracts with commissions, I realised that there is a direct tension. If you try and squeeze that process too much, you end up with fuzziness about this bit of the process.
Lights up a minute. I just wanted to see from suppliers again. Suppliers up, hands up, please. And be honest about this, who feels that they have been realistically asked to carry an overspend? Not so many. A couple over here, but not so many. Well, let's talk about who actually signs off and who unsigns off, for example. Let's see. When a programme is officially signed off, it should, from an indie's point of view, be signed off. If it gets reopened, the cost, times and money haven't been budgeted. How much is that actually happening? Let's look at this. Commissioners first, unsigned off. Have you ever signed off a programme and then had further changes requested by your head of department or channel? No, 59%. And you heard, of course, that in the last one when Alex was in 2014 saying it's very, very scary to have some changes requested after a programme has been signed off. So as far as commissioners are concerned, have you ever signed off a programme then had further changes requested by a department head? You were quite clear that the majority say absolutely no, but half the commissioners had a programme, had signed off a programme, only have to go back to the Indies and say it's been unsigned off by a controller. Is that acceptable, Kevin?
No. It depends, I'm afraid, is the answer. I don't know the examples, I can't. So it's signed off, it's agreed, they've started, and then the commissioner goes back to the producer to say, I had a word with Kevin and he said he doesn't like the colour red, so could you do it a different colour? Is that what that means? I find that implausible. I find that highly unlikely at ITV.
Okay, a commissioner goes into an edit, says, I've absolutely signed off this programme. The programme is then looked at by channel controller. The channel controller requires changes. That presumably is a cost to the broadcaster.
Yes, it's a cost to the broadcaster.
And it's completely
if I was shown
but
something...
it's a huge amount.
I will always have changes. What my team do very cleverly is they send it to me at the very last minute and go, it has been picture locked, it has been signed off, it has been legalised. Essentially, unless you are prepared to put your hand in your pocket, you cannot make any changes. So I will go and I say, I thought the opening sequence was good, now I would have done this, that and the other, and going, and you can do that, but you're going to have to put your hand in your pocket, because as far as I'm concerned, I've signed it off. So I think they manage me very well, because I've always got a better opinion than they've got. I'm always better in the editing.
I actually didn't realise you were such a pushover.
Yeah, I am, because sometimes they're a pain in the arse to have an argument with. It's just like... And actually, at the end of the day, I think it's about the viewer at home. It's not about me particularly, whether you use thee or thou. All that matters is the person sitting at home. You know what I mean? I will often have conversations with Lucy about the script and should you use that word or that word. I'm going, okay, who cares? As long as the viewer at home understands it, I don't mind. She cares. I let her do her job, which is to commission.
Zai, have you unsigned off something that's been signed?
No, not knowingly. But again,
not knowingly? Love that one.
The team will give me the shows to look at the appropriate time when it's not picture locked. It's fine cut before we picture lock it. Then that will be when they take my comments on board. I don't think that should ever really happen if you are organised properly.
But look at that.
Yeah, I mean that's not broken by my channel.
Yes, I mean,
that's clearly all the BBC.
Yeah.
All the BBC.
But I think it's incumbent on the commissioning editor to make sure if it's a new series and you want to go to the channel and say, will you have a look? How do you feel about it? You should do that at the time where there is enough enough time to have feedback. That is absolutely incumbent on them. If it's a picture lock, it's also incumbent on everyone to make that absolutely clear. And at that point, if it's been picture locked, absolutely, we should pick up the bill for any changes.
Right.
It's very clear.
Let's just say you're all in agreement about that. After picture lock, you will all pick up the tab for changes.
If there are changes, we should pay for
If there are changes.
Right. Well, that's
there is something behind this as well, where everybody on this panel here, you're all trying to make the shows better because you want a hit, and you're all working in the interests of that programme and that producer. And I totally agree when Kevin said, there are some shows you go a little bit to that is not going to change that show. There are some shows where you know what, and this is where I really try not to do the these and the thous, and I'm a real believer in if there's one note that I think will actually change the fortunes of that show, of course I want to do it, and I'm sure the producer would welcome that. And I'd hope that the conversation that you're having with the producers say, we're all trying to make this show as good as it can be. And that's not about whether it's your own personal view, it's actually about whether you think this show's going to work for your channel. But it has to be within the right time frame.
Micromanagement is obviously happening at some point here, and that is what this is showing up. I mean, hopefully, what we have informally at Sky is I have made the undertaking to the commissioning team that I don't give them a note back unless I think it's going to make a 5% difference or more. Judge that by maths however you want. But I think if we have sort of rules like that, that really helps with this. And so it's incumbent on all of us to be like that.
In your creative contract, let me just ask Ian first, in your creative contract, is there something about this? One sign-off is sign-off.
But my commissioning editors are much better at signing off programmes than me and deciding whether those programmes are ready to go.
That's carte blanche for all commissioning editors at Channel 4.
They are. I mean, I was slightly worried that you were going to remind me that I did at Newsnight have a reputation for interfering with films 10 minutes from transmission.
It's okay, you've learned a lot. But as part of the creative contract, and that's really interesting, that if a programme is signed off, that's it, signed off, and any cost will be borne by the broadcaster. I think you've all been very, very clear on that.
Kirsty, there is also, I was sort of picking up as well, I think there is something about when new commissioners are starting and some producers feeling like they don't have a right to have a view or a right to have a creative vision. Everybody's employed as a commissioner because we think they've got a really good view and a really good opinion about programmes. But there does have to be, people grow in their jobs. When you've got new teams, I would also hope there is respect both ways. The comment about an assistant commissioner, I think is incredibly important. An assistant commissioner, that is a proper job. They commission, they are obviously learning how to develop their own slate, but that isn't belittling them by saying, you can't make all decisions.
And I think, to be honest, the more commissioners and controllers who've been in indies and have actually made programmes and remember what it's like, absolutely, the cold face, the better.
But so much of this is all about having a respectful relationship, a two-way street respectful relationship, where, if we make changes, we take responsibility, but we also expect the independent, who might not always get things right, to also take responsibility. And we can't just have everything dumped on us all the time. We have our faults, and we certainly don't make things easy all the time, but if you respect each other and if you communicate with each other, the aim, as Charlotte said, is to work together to create success together.
Funny you should mention that. Coming on now, about...
I shouldn't have mentioned it, should I?
Anyway. Less agreement, for example, on working for free. Now, let's look at the indies and the commissioners in this. Have you ever been asked to start production on a commission at your own risk without an official green light? 66.1% of indies have done that. Commissioners, have you ever asked an indie to start a production on a commission at their own risk without an official green light? Absolutely not, 95.2%. Somebody's fibbing.
Somebody is fibbing.
Somebody's fibbing big style. Hands up. Suppliers who've been asked to start without an official green light. Look, this is actually illegal, practically. Without an official green light, without a contract. I mean, that, in this day and age, is that acceptable when you're actually asking people to put in place teams? You may be asking people to open a new office. Kevin Ligo, what a massive disparity. It's shocking, isn't it?
Yes.
You will look shocked.
I'm shocked again. I know it's hard, but an indie should really, really say, to do what you're asking me now, I'm having to spend money, therefore cover me, make it sure, send emails to everybody you've ever met saying this is what I've been asked to do. That's an extraordinary disparity.
It is extraordinary, and I think it's one of the most shocking in this whole session.
But of that, I wonder, how many was it fine in the end? Because we all know there's a bit of give and take, and quite often it's, don't worry, it is greenlit, you just haven't had the paperwork yet, but I've got to sign this person right now or I'm not going to get the right people to do it, carry on. That there is a risk and that does go on, but I would also hope that, that we, the broadcast, if we then change our mind, didn't greenlight it, we do pick up the cost.
It's shocking. I mean, I maybe ask you all now to commit that you would never ask an indie to start production without having an official green light. I want you all to commit never to doing that.
Well, do you mean a contract or a green light? Do you mean a signed contract?
I mean a contract. A green light could be a drink in the pub.
Yeah, or I think
if something's being turned around in 48 hours, and you need them to get going, you haven't got time to get a contract in place. What you would
you can have a memorandum. You can actually have a memorandum.
You would have certainly something from me saying any costs that are spent would be covered by me.
Yeah, and that.
But I'm not sure it would be a contract.
I think it would be a memorandum, and it would be here's the money to get going now while we sort out the budget. Because of course some of this is then a conversation about budget and ambition and ed spec, and of course that does take time because we'll meticulously go through what are we signing up to do. But I think in terms of if anyone is going to spend money because we're saying we want to do this project, then we should be saying the money for the next 2 weeks, but while we get the contract sorted, is this. And absolutely we should pay for that.
Sorry. No question. Right, well now we've actually got an app question coming up now for indies. We don't have that question, so that is not going to be one of our last questions. Let's look at the terms of trade now. This is one that is a bit shocking as well. In the last 12 months, indies, have you been asked to agree a non-terms deal in return for a green light? If so, by which broadcaster or platform? Let's look at the response on this. In the last 12 months, have you been asked to agree a non-terms deal in return for a green light? If so, by which broadcaster or platform? I'm saying that because the only two that have yeses are the Golden Boy. No, the only two. You're fine.
It's a negative.
You're fine, sorry.
Negative.
ITV, not good there. You've actually asked an indie.
Bad.
Are you feeling upset about that, Kevin?
5% of the time we've asked an indie to do a non-terms deal. Yeah, but maybe it was to their advantage.
But is that acceptable for you as a broadcaster to do it? In the last 12 months, have you ever been asked to agree a non-terms deal? Yes, BBC 7, Channel 5, 7, 5 and 4. Ben?
Well, I think we've not really had terms of trade. We've had very old terms of trade since 2010, which has not been helpful in truth. It's something that I've been quite passionate about. So there's been an awful lot of negotiation, and there always will be negotiation up to a point, whether we originate the idea or, what kind of rights that we need for whichever platforms that we want the programme to play on. What I am pleased to be able to say is that we have now agreed terms of trade with PAC. That will be signed off officially in the next few weeks. PAC are delighted. I'm absolutely thrilled. It's taken far too long, and hopefully that will make this kind of thing not 7%. But there will always be there's got to be a little bit of wriggle room because nothing can be set in stone, and you can't apply the same thing to every single programme because essentially some programmes are particularly unique and have complexities about them.
And I think that is about, obviously without knowing the detail, but I think it refers to NQIs that quite often we will have a different terms of trade, which is in the interest of the producer, that there will be a slightly different arrangement. But again, if it's in the interest and mutually agreed and mutually beneficial, then I don't think there's anything that's right. I think it also will refer to the BBC Three issue, which obviously the new framework, the new media framework that is being developed for BBC Three and is constantly evolving. We know that digital is not the same as linear and doesn't have the similar commercial pattern to it. So that's absolutely evolving and very much under discussion. So I can only assume that 7% refers to those kind of deals. But as Ben says, there is wriggle room because the interests of the supplier and different projects and different models. We're not a rigid, never-changing industry. This industry is changing rapidly. We have to adapt.
Now, at this stage in the game, we can return you to a couple of things that you've said during this session. So let's just look at the slides now. At the end of this session, Ian, less than 24 hours notice for rescheduling the meeting is completely unacceptable. Zai, I want it to be unacceptable to cancel meetings. Charlotte, Indies, please be vocal about meeting cancellations. We should pay if these costs incur. We need to keep Indies more informed of progress towards a yes or a no. Ben, If you're not getting answers, bring them to me and I'll get you a decision. Kevin, 2 weeks for a response is what I want to see. I think that's one page. And the second page, it's not acceptable to reopen a programme after sign-off. Incumbent on my commissioning editors to get any feedback in time for it to be incorporated. After picture lock, we'll pick up costs. Ben, unless you're prepared to put your hand in your pocket, you shouldn't reopen a locked anyhow, or ahow, whatever that is. All. If changes are made after picture lock, we'll pick up the tab. So that is an absolute commitment. We'll return to these statements next year because I understand that this survey is going to be repeated next year. So we'll be able to see the results this year and see how the report cards have changed by this time next year. At the beginning of this session, I told you that actually it's a critical and incredibly important part of the government strategy that the creative industries punch even above their weight, £92 billion so far. This is not amateur hour if we're going to be global competitors. So, as a parting treat, here is how not to do it.
Well, first of all, hello Edinburgh. I was hoping to be there with you in person today to take part in whatever it is you're doing at this year's television festival. But here at the BBC, as some of you may know, we're currently in the middle of a particularly stimulating phase in our Strategic Damage Limitation Initiative, which we're rolling out across all our platforms going forward. Nevertheless, I've been invited to make some sort of short keynote address, although I prefer to think of it as a chance to scribble a few headline words on the chalkboard at the front of the class. Something perhaps to glance up at occasionally in the unlikely event of you losing focus or getting bored in the hours that lie ahead. These are exciting times in the television industry. As I've said elsewhere, one of my core beliefs is that problems are just solutions waiting to happen. And there's no doubt that we're heading collectively towards some potentially epic solutions at the moment. As my colleague Siobhan Sharp from Fun Media, formerly Perfect Curve, might put it, and in fact does put it almost constantly, television, what even is that? Like I don't even know what that is. It's a point, and perhaps a place to start from. So my first word on the chalkboard would be audience. Who are we making television for, and where have they all gone? It goes without saying that it's the millennial generation that we're talking about here. For anyone under the age of 35, the idea of owning either a corner or a room is a foreign enough concept already, let alone the idea of owning any kind of fixed screen to put in it. But just think for a moment about the opportunities that gives us all. Here at the BBC, for instance, without giving too much away at this stage, we're already making plans to replace our iPlayer platform with the new, more millennial-facing BBC Snatch Tap, downloadable to any device, where instead of programmes being available for weeks or even months at a time, I mean, let's face it, yawn, key content disappears before you can watch it. We think that'll put us firmly back ahead of our viewers again, which is surely where we all want to be. My next word might be diversity. In fact, it is diversity. For many of us in the industry, diversity has become nothing less than the reason we're here. For others, of course, it's the reason why we aren't. That's one of the reasons why we've recently made a commitment to launch a new service, BBC BAME, alongside and in parallel with our other channels, where, for example, for the first time, viewers will be able to choose between watching Hugh Edwards presenting the news on BBC One or via the red button to see Clive Myrie reading exactly the same news at exactly the same time, but without a Welsh accent. And that's just one example. The next word I'd like to scribble on the board is gender. This, of course, is a big one. It's everywhere. I'm sure that as you look around you in the room there in Edinburgh, you'll see examples of it right now. Or will you? Because this is a word whose meaning is changing virtually as we speak. For one person, it might mean the freedom at last no longer to be defined by the sexual and social norms assigned to you at birth, whilst for another person, it might mean the freedom to earn just under 2/3 as much as you used to earn before everyone else found out. Getting gender equality right is one of the hardest tasks we face in the industry. And the sensitivities around LGBTQI issues are at the forefront of all our minds. But I'm an optimist. It's hard to believe now, but it's worth remembering that back in 2015, when I was appointed head of values at the BBC, it was still just plain old LGB. I think we can all feel proud of the fact that since then we've managed to add T, Q and I to the equation. It's a start, but there's so much further to go. And these are exciting times for all of us. My final heading is social mobility. Whatever the ethical, technical or economic challenges we face at the moment, one thing at least we can all agree on is that there are too many educated middle-class people in television. The last thing any of us needs is television made by people like you and me. Hashtag me neither, hashtag it's over, hashtag tough shit. At the BBC, we've already started to put measures in place to drive this forward. Some of you might have seen the television BAFTAs on BBC One earlier this year. Some of you may even have been there, which was obviously an oversight on our part and something we're hoping to put right going forward. And it's not about dumbing down. It's about the opposite of that. It's about empowering ignorance and giving an audience the space to properly own its lack of ambition. In the end, it's about direction of travel. And perhaps that's an appropriate place to finish. It doesn't mean we're there yet, or that we'll ever get there, or that the direction we're travelling in is the right one, given where we seem to have started from. But it's a commitment to seek to put in place some answers to some of those questions. It's a reminder of just how important the work you're doing there in Edinburgh is. So in the end, then, it's all good. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much to our sponsors, C21. But first of all, and most importantly, please thank our panel.